Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Shikha Verma, Medical Advisor for Lupin Oncology. Lupin is an innovation-led transnational pharmaceutical company and is one among top 5 Indian pharma companies. And we pride in belonging to an industry which makes a difference in lives of the people. On behalf of Lupin, I welcome you all for today's webinar. The topic of webinar is updates in CML, and the speaker for the session is Dr. Smita Saldana. Dr. Smita is currently working as Assistant Professor, Department of Medical Oncology, Hematology and DMT at Kidwai Memorial Institute of Oncology, Bangalore since last 4 years. She has overall experience of 11 years and is skilled in clinical research, medical education, epidemiology, pediatrics and oncology. She did her DM focus in medical oncology from Kidwai Memorial Institute of Oncology and has multiple peer-reviewed publications to her credit. And she has received multiple awards at various national and international conferences. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. So introducing myself already, thank you for the warm words of introduction, Dr. Shika. So it's my pleasure to talk on updates in CML, the recent updates in CML today. So you can have whatever questions you have, you can keep it for the end, and we will have the question answer sessions at the end of the talk. So basically, all of us know CML is a very common disease. It's a chronic myeloid lymphoma, and it's a myeloproliferative neoplasm. It comes under the classification of MPNs. And basically, it is a dysregulated production and uncontrolled production of the mature and immature granulocytes with normal differentiation. It basically happens because of a genetic change, that is the BCR-ABL genetic change. So there is basically something called as a reciprocal translocation of these two genes. And this abnormal chromosome is called a Philadelphia chromosome. So here, if you see in this cartoon, this is the normal chromosome 9 and the normal chromosome 22. This portion is the ABL and this portion here is the BCR gene. So there is a reciprocal translocation. So what happens? The genes, the chromosome has a break at the ABL mutation point and also at the BCR point, and there is a switchover. So this will be your Philadelphia chromosome, where it is 22, 9, 22 we say. This is the 9 and this is the 22. And this BCR-ABL fusion product is responsible for all the various changes what happens in chronic myeloid leukemia. So coming to why should we know CML? It's a very common condition in our population, almost 1 to 2 cases per 1 lakh population. And it accounts to around 15 to 20% of all the adult leukemias. The incidence increases with age, the median age being around 55 years. The most good point about CML is majority of the patients, it's almost 85% of the patients present to us in the chronic phase, and only less than 15% will be in the other advanced phase, like maybe the accelerated phase or the blast crisis. And the majority of your deaths are due to the accelerated phase or the blast crisis. The other thing is usually many of them may be just asymptomatic, and just while going to for a testing, maybe for a surgery or for some kind of blood test, they find to have increased blood counts, and then they are referred across to the hematologist or the oncologist saying, kindly evaluate. The common symptoms will be usually they will have early satiety, fatigability. Some of them may have bleeding tendencies. Early satiety because the majority of the patients will have splenomegaly, and it is usually moderate to massive splenomegaly. Now this cartoon here describes the 3 phases of CML. So we have the chronic phase, almost 85% of the population, the accelerated phase around less than 10% of the population, and 5% blast crisis. So the median duration, if you do not give treatment of a chronic phase, is 5 to 6 years, accelerated phase is 6 to 9 months, and blast crisis is 3 to 6 months. So you can also look at the percentage. What is important for us to define these 3 phases is depending on their blast percentage. So if the blast percentage is less than 15%, it is usually chronic phase. 15 to 20%, it becomes the accelerated phase. The WHO says 10 to 15%, and your MD Anderson says around 15 to 30%. The blast crisis is when it is more than 30% as per the MD Anderson criteria, and as per WHO, it is 20%. For all practical purposes, we follow the WHO criteria. So let us take it as 20%. And chronic phase, usually most of them are asymptomatic. Accelerated phase, they can behave like a acute leukemia itself. So they may have increased tiredness, weight loss, the spleen size may increase tremendously. And blast crisis, actually it is when there is blast cells in the bone marrow and peripheral blood of more than 20%, or they have extramedullary hematopoiesis. So blast crisis behaves like a acute leukemia. So usually the presentation will have, they may have some bleeding tendencies, they may have some petechial rashes on the body, they may have swollen glands like lymphadenopathy, and some of them will have recurrent infections. So if you ask what is the diagnostic test, one single diagnostic test for CML will be usually the peripheral smear. In the peripheral smear, if you see a shift to the left with a myelocyte bulge, this usually categorically tells us a diagnosis of chronic myeloid leukemia. So you look at the blood, you look at the peripheral blood smear. So usually you will see basophilia, you will see a myelocyte bulge, you will see metamyelocytes. All the precursors of your normal WBCs are seen, neutrophils. So the neutrophil percentage will be very high and you will see a myelocyte bulge. And also the same thing may be seen in the bone marrow. Also, you will require the detection of the Philadelphia chromosome, that is the BCR-ABL reciprocal translocation gene requires to be demonstrated. It can be by your conventional cytogenetic analysis or by FISH. Conventional cytogenetic analysis depends on the center and the expertise. Sometimes it may pick up, sometimes it may be missed out. At that point, you require to do a FISH. And RT-PCR is the best to detect the BCR-ABL gene. Now, when you're looking for RT-PCR, you're not looking only for the qualitative, you're looking for the quantitative also, because it is quantitative RT-PCR is very important in our monitoring of the patient. Then how do you, once you diagnose, how will you assess the response? Assess the response by the hematological basic CBC test. So you look for complete hematologic response. That is when the total count is less than 10,000 per lakh, platelet count of more than 1.5 lakhs, and hemoglobin of more than 10 gram%. And you look at the cytogenetic test and the molecular test, that is RT-PCR for BCR-ABL levels. So this is done at a periodic interval of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And we have a particular criteria. They have to fit into the diagnostic values, what is supposed to be as per the ELN guidelines. So what are the basic goals of our treatment? We are looking for a hematological remission. That is a normal CBC and physical examination. The normal CBC is, I told you already, hemoglobin percentage of more than 10%, total count of more than less than 10,000, and platelet count of more than 1.5 lakhs, with no physical symptoms like organomegaly should be resolved, that is splenomegaly. The cytogenetic remission is the chromosome level. The normal chromosome should be returned. So the Ph positive cells should be less than 0%. And there should be basically PCR levels. So the PCR level should be, for BCR-ABL should be less than 0.1% at 6 to 12 months. So why are we talking about CML? In the initial era, before 2000, CML was treated like any other leukemia, acute leukemia. So everybody was, when you were diagnosed CML, it was known that they also will undergo some kind of intensive IV infusional chemotherapy, and usually only transplantation was the cure for CML, like acute leukemias. But in the 2000 era, there was the advent of a tyrosine kinase inhibitor called Gleevec, which was called the magic bullet. And that drug changed the treatment options for CML. So today we treat CML like any other chronic disease like diabetes or hypertension. Only thing is you need to monitor them regularly. So the various options for CML are tyrosine kinase inhibitor. In this you have multiple options. We have imatinib, you have nilotinib, you have dasatinib, you have bosutinib and ponatinib. The first 4 molecules are available in India. Chemotherapy, You have earlier days, only interferon was one of the therapy for good cure for CML patients and allogenic stem cell transplantation. The recent advances are ponatinib is not yet available in India, but it is available in the other in the US and the other countries. And the newer molecule ABL001. So roughly, this is a cartoon describing how will you treat a patient. So if it's a chronic phase, you will go ahead with the first generation or second generation tyrosine kinase inhibitors. So it can be imatinib, nilotinib, dasatinib, or bosutinib. If it's an accelerated phase of blast crisis, you will treat it like you go with the higher dose of you have to go with the second generation TKI preferably, and you will go at a higher dose of imatinib if they're not affordable for second generation TKI. If it's a blast crisis, it is treated like a acute leukemia, depending on which lineage they belong to. If it belongs like a lymphoid, you treat it like a ALL with the TKI. If it behaves like a myeloid lineage, you treat it like AML with a TKI. So tyrosine kinase inhibitors, tyrosine kinase inhibitors are important mediators of the signaling cascade. So this is basically a cartoon describing the tyrosine kinase molecule. The identification and development of therapeutic agents for disease states that there are linked to abnormal activation of tyrosine kinases due to enhanced expression, mutation, or autocrine stimulation leading to abnormal downstream oncogenic pathway. And this is a potent target for the cancer therapy. Also, the SRC group of genes. This also is also important, and this is also targeted when you're using a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So this is basically a structure of a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So you have an extracellular domain, you have a transmembrane alpha helix, and a cytosolic domain. So your tyrosine kinase inhibitor comes and binds at this ligand binding site and prevents the downstream pathways. So you have various tyrosine kinase inhibitors, the EGFR inhibitor, the platelet-derived growth factor inhibitor, the VEGF inhibitors, and the non-receptor tyrosine kinase inhibitors like SRC, JAK inhibitors, and ABL inhibitors. So in CML, all these tyrosine kinase inhibitors or these various factors play a role. So how was the tyrosine kinase or targeted therapy evolved in CML? So initially, in the treatment of leukemia or lymphoma, we had a new molecule called rituximab, which was developed and approved by FDA in 1997. And then came the imatinib or the Gleevec, which was approved in 2000. And this was initially used in interferon refractory CML, and it was used for the CML blast or accelerated crisis, and also for metastatic GIST and pH positive ALL. Then in October 2007, we had a new molecule called dasatinib. So this was used for patients where on CML with resistance to imatinib or intolerant to imatinib. And then in pH positive ALL, also in blast crisis. Then you have the other second generation TKI, that is nilotinib. Geftinib is used in lung cancer. Erlotinib is also used in lung cancer. Lapatinib for metastatic breast cancer. Then you have sunitinib, which was used in renal cell carcinoma, and sorafenib. So these are the FDA approved TKIs in general. So all these drugs are available in India. And most of these drugs have generic versions except probably nilotinib, everybody, and sunitinib. All the other molecules have a generic version. So coming to the mechanism of action of this BCR-ABL TKI inhibitor, both imatinib and nilotinib bind to a segment of the kinase domain that fixes the enzyme in a closed or non-functional state, and in which the protein is unable to bind its substrate or phosphate donor. Therefore, ATP is not formed, and therefore it prevents the further downstream pathway and further the tumor proliferation. Whereas dasatinib is a more potent than your imatinib and nilotinib. It binds both the open and closed configuration of BCR-ABL kinase. It also acts on the SRC group of kinases. So the bioavailability of this, both imatinib and dasatinib, is almost 98%, whereas nilotinib is less. Then distribution, it is highly protein bound. The half-life of imatinib is 18 hours, dasatinib is around 5 hours, and nilotinib is around 17 hours. So nilotinib is usually given on a BD dosage. So these are the second generation TKIs. They all, the three second generation TKIs, that is dasatinib, nilotinib, and bosutinib, are potent inhibitors of BCR-ABL than the imatinib. Among this, dasatinib is more potent and also bosutinib is more potent. It exhibits significant activity against all the resistant mutations, except some few which are named mutations, but they are not effective against T315I mutation. And all of them have been approved by the US FDA. So the goal of our tyrosine kinase inhibitor therapy is to achieve a complete cytogenetic response, that is less than 1% of BCR-ABL IS ratio within 12 months after your starting of therapy. So what was the need for this second generation TKIs? You had a beautiful drug called imatinib, so why we worried to get a second generation TKI? Because imatinib, after starting, at some point did show they were developed imatinib resistance, or the BCR-ABL tyrosine kinase domain mutation resistance they started developing. And at that point, we required to have the other newer molecules.
Okay.
Is this fine?
Ma'am, you're live. Please continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the estimated 5-year OS and PFS for the dasatinib arm, if you look over here, 100 mg OD it was given, and imatinib 400 mg OD. So when you're looking here, the estimated 5-year OS was 91% versus 90. So obviously we are not looking for a difference in the OS. We are only looking for a difference probably in the PFS, and you're looking for a probably the major molecular response, a deeper one. Because we know CML is already doing very well with your first line TKI. So you don't expect any kind of difference in the OS, which is seen in this cartoon. So if you look at the 5-year responses and outcomes by molecular response at 3 months, so you look at dasatinib arm, less than 10%, 94% of the patients. In imatinib is also good, 92%. You look at the MR 4.5. So here it is 54% versus 48%. So I will not say anything about the OS because there is not a big difference in the OS. So when it comes to treatment-free survival, 97% versus 97%. So if you look here at the molecular response, with the dasatinib, the patients achieving a deeper molecular response was higher, almost 60%, and MR4 was almost 47% versus 37%, and MR 4.5, 31% versus 23%. Why are we interested in this MR4, MR 4.5 is, as I told, we are now moving ahead to an era called treatment-free intervals. Though we do not practice it very often, but if a patient is desirous of having a treatment-free interval, we can try it. Specifically in a population who are young, pediatric population, people who are very well compliant and educated, who are willing to be compliant and willing to get the BCR-ABL testing, molecular testing every month for 1 year, every 3 months thereafter for the second year, and once after that every 3 to 6 months in the following years. And at any point, if they lose their major molecular response, they are supposed to restart the treatment within 4 weeks of losing the hematological response. So the final results from DECISION trial continue to support dasatinib at a 100 mg dose as a safe and effective first-line therapy for the long-term treatment of CML-CP. When you come to accelerated phase, the dosing is a little different. So the next, there was a randomized trial of dasatinib versus imatinib in CP chronic myeloid leukemia. So here they looked at the patients achieving 3 log, 4 log, 4.5 log reduction in the BCR-ABL transcript levels. So among the patients who achieved hematological CR, the 3-year relapse-free survival was 91% with dasatinib versus 88% with imatinib. The grade 3 and 4 toxicities was 18% with the dasatinib and 8% in the imatinib arm. So this is true. We all know imatinib is better tolerated because the first line TKI, it is a less potent. Dasatinib, since it is more potent, the amount of toxicities are also a little higher compared to imatinib, but it is manageable. That is the important point. And dasatinib induced more complete cytogenetic response and deeper molecular responses after 12 months compared with the imatinib 400 mg with a median follow-up of 3 years. So they concluded saying dasatinib compared with imatinib has a more short-term cytogenetic and molecular response, more hematologic toxicity, and similar overall survival. Next, there was an article published in Annals of Hematology, outcomes of switching to dasatinib after imatinib related low-grade adverse events. So we see many patients who are started on imatinib, and sometimes they are not tolerant of imatinib because imatinib causes a lot of skin discoloration and peripheral edema. These are the most common toxicities we see with imatinib. At that point, we can think of switching over to the second generation TKI. So this was a DASPER study, open label phase 4 study determined to determine whether chronic low-grade non-hematologic adverse events in imatinib treated patients will improve if they switch to dasatinib. So they basically looked at grade 1 and 2 imatinib related adverse event. So almost 77% of them were resolved or improved within 3 months of switching to dasatinib. The dasatinib maintained a consistent safety profile. They had few headaches, pleural effusion being the most common thing which we see, and fatigue. And the patients either maintained 56% or improved 44% their molecular response on dasatinib. So basically this was done, patients who switched to dasatinib also experienced improved patient report symptom as measured by the MD Anderson symptom inventory for CML. So if you look at this bar chart, you can see this is the resolved adverse event. Almost 75.2% of the adverse events were resolved with dasatinib, and unchanged in around 22.3%, worsened only in 0.8%. So it's a significant difference of the improvement of the adverse events. But in practice per se, I must say that our patients are relatively compliant with imatinib because probably it is coming out of the assistance program. It's coming totally free for them. So even if they have a little toxicity, they are managing it. They are not willing to switch over to the second generation TKI earlier. But probably now with the advent of generic versions with cost-effective therapy, probably patients will be willing to switch over to your second generation TKI. Because we have only imatinib, you have generic versions, you have dasatinib generic versions. For nilotinib, you still don't have a generic version. Bosutinib also, you don't have a generic version. Ponatinib is anyway not available. So you're talking about only imatinib and dasatinib over here. So if you look at the molecular response, again at baseline, at 1, 3, 5 months and 20, this thing, and at the 12 months, you see a good number of patients had reached MR 4.5. This is the blue one. This is the MR 4.5. And major molecular response, good number of patients were in major molecular response. So this is the MD Anderson score for their symptoms. Here also dasatinib scores over imatinib. So the conclusion was the efficacy and quality of life and symptom burden improved in many patients despite the onset of dasatinib related adverse events. This suggests that imatinib treated patients with chronic low-grade adverse events would benefit from switching to treatment with dasatinib. The next study is, now we are talking a lot about the lower dose of dasatinib. So there was a single institutional study done at MD Anderson where they used low dose dasatinib once daily, that is 50 mg. We also have patients on 50 mg daily when they do not tolerate the adequate dose of 100 mg. But otherwise, ideally, we start 100 mg per day. So here they wanted to see the benefit of patients using efficacy and safety for lower dose dasatinib. So they basically had 75 patients of newly diagnosed CML-CP. And if you look here, so the pink arm is for 100 mg and blue arm is for 50 mg. So at 6 months, the complete cytogenetic response 73% with 100 mg and 86% with the 50 mg arm. Imatinib 59%. And again at 9 months, 78% versus 85%, and 12 months, 83% versus 88%. So significantly, 50 mg was not inferior to 100 mg dasatinib. And obviously, if it is coming at a lesser cost, the dose is smaller, so obviously the toxicities will be lesser, and you're not going to alter the efficacy. It is a good data, but the only problem here is it was a single center study. So we are looking for a multi-centric study with the more number of population. And if you come to the major molecular response, so at 12 months, 79% versus 46%. So here they have compared to the historical data, decision trial, not to the, they didn't have a control arm there. So they have taken this 46% is from the decision data. You may see why it's so much of difference. So this is from the historical data. Therefore, the difference you are seeing. So they concluded saying dasatinib 50 mg daily is active and well tolerated in patients with newly diagnosed CML-CP. It should be further explored as a new potential standard of care option for CML. Now, many people may ask me, what is your take on it? Since it is a single institutional study, not with a small number of patients, CML is a disease where we have a huge patient base and you have data of imatinib for almost more than 20 years. So we will still go with the standard guidelines of 100 mg, but for patients who are not tolerating 100 mg, 100% we can go with 50 mg, and you have definitely data saying it is not inferior to giving start with 50 mg. So next, let us look at the long-term follow-up of lower dose dasatinib. There was a study here, which is published in September 2019. So again, 83 patients with newly diagnosed CML-CP, the same patients. Again, they compared with the historical data. So if you look at the complete cytogenetic response at 12 months, 83% versus 94%, good. The major molecular response at 12 months, 81% versus 46%. Again, it is because this is a historical data from the Decision trial. So the results were, the rates of BCR-ABL1 transcript levels were at less than 10% and less than 1% at 3 months were 96% and 77%. The cumulative rates for major molecular response with the 4 log reduction and a 4.5 log reduction at 12 months was 81%, 55% and 49% respectively. At a median follow-up of 24 months, none of the patients had disease transformation, which is good. And only 6% of the patients developed pleural effusion. 80% required dose reduction. 2% failed to achieve any cytogenetic or molecular response. So the most common adverse event we are worried about is pleural effusion, at which point we do reduce the dose to 50 mg. So the updated results continue to support the 50 mg of daily as an effective and safe dose for early CML-CP. Next, can we use dasatinib in pediatric patient? This is another common question. You know, imatinib can be used in pediatric patient. So here they wanted to look if it can be used in your children. So it was a phase 2 study. There were 3 cohorts: imatinib resistant CML-CP, imatinib resistant or intolerant CML in accelerated or blast phase or pH positive ALL, and newly diagnosed CML-CP treated with tablets or powder for oral suspension. So there are 113 patients. So 48% were imatinib resistant and 73% were newly diagnosed. So major cytogenetic response more than 30% was reached by 3 months, and complete cytogenetic response more than 55% was reached by 6 months in the newly diagnosed CML-CP group. The PFS by 48 months was 72%, 78% and 93% in the imatinib resistant group and newly diagnosed CML-CP. There was no dasatinib related pleural or pericardial effusion or pulmonary edema or pulmonary arterial hypertension. Bone growth and development events were reported in 4% of patients. So if you look here, in this cytogenetic response, relatively good cytogenetic response with dasatinib compared to your imatinib arm. And looking at the molecular responses over for all the treated patients, this is the curve showing again the PFS, a good molecular response with dasatinib when you're using in pediatric patients. So this is the largest prospective trial to date in children with CML-CP, and dasatinib was found to be a safe and effective treatment of pediatric CML-CP patients. The target responses to first or second line dasatinib were met early, and they had deeper molecular response. So safety of dasatinib in pediatric patients was similar to that observed in adults. However, no cases of pleural or pericardial effusion or pulmonary arterial hypertension were reported. So this is very important to us because pediatric patient definitely would not like to take treatment for a long duration. If you're saying lifelong treatment, it will be like if a pediatric child comes to you at the age of 10 years. If the child lives for around 60 years, it will be almost 50 years of his life is going to be on the therapy. Because so far we have not told that we can stop TK at any point. But here, if you're going to look at a deeper molecular response and a faster major molecular response, you can go for a treatment-free interval, at which time you can monitor the patient regularly and hope the patient does not progress. So coming to the long-term results of dasatinib in CML. So this is basically a data from 2005 to August 2014. Patients were given 100 mg or 50 mg dosage of twice daily. So if you look here, the complete cytogenetic responses over time has definitely maintained from around 43.2% to almost 88.2%, a good response, major molecular response. And MR4 is also in the red line, maintained at a very high, good level of around 70% to 81.8%. And 4.5 major molecular response at 4.5 log reduction is also good. So this is the 5-year and 10-year survival outcomes of patients with dasatinib. So if you see, they are doing pretty well. All of them have a good survival curve in the 10-year survival. So the 10-year survival was 89%. The transformation-free survival was 95%. Failure-free survival rate was 65%. And the more than 4-point log reduction was almost 79.5%, which is all very good data for dasatinib. So conclusion was long-term follow-up of dasatinib shows excellent safety profile, rapid cytogenetic responses, good major molecular responses of log reduction of 4 and 4.5, and excellent long-term survival. So what are the take-home messages? Basically, dasatinib at the present state can be used in the frontline treatment of CML CML or treatment-naive patients. It can be administered once daily at a dose of 100 mg per day. Earlier, we used to give 50 mg twice daily, to probably when we initially started. And the dosing is lesser. It induces higher and faster cytogenetic response and also major molecular response. When the patient cannot tolerate imatinib or nilotinib, or patient progresses on imatinib or nilotinib, you can consider dasatinib. In a patient with the blast crisis, definitely dasatinib is the treatment of choice because it has CNS, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it has an impact on the CNS. So it takes care of the CNS disease. It's also a choice of TKI in the patients with cardiovascular, liver, and metabolic comorbidities like hyperglycemia, hypertriglyceridemia. The long-term follow-up of dasatinib continues to show excellent safety profile and rapid and cytogenetic and molecular responses, durable deep molecular responses, and excellent long-term survival outcomes in CML patients. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful presentation. There are few questions. Ma'am, like, is there a specific criteria to select patients for treatment-free remissions?
Yeah, there is a particular criteria. The first thing is the patient should have had a major molecular response for at least 3 years earlier. So it's important that you cannot start a patient on treatment for 1 year and say after the end of 1 patient has a good response, or after 2 years the patient is in major molecular response, you cannot plan for a treatment-free interval. It should be at least minimum 3 years, and it has to be log reduction of more than 4. The major molecular BCR-ABL transcript level should be more than 4 log reduction. The next thing is the patient should be compliant. It's very important. So the patient should be willing to come for a regular, every monthly BCR-ABL quantitative checking. So the first, you will keep on doing for the first 1 year, every month. At any point you feel the patient has lost his molecular response, within 4 weeks you need to restart the patient on the last TKI which was given at the same dose. Next, you are planning a treatment-free interval only in patients who are young, patients, pediatric patient, young lady who is desirous of a family. You will not consider for all the patients.
And like it's always second line TKIs which we consider using in case of treatment-free remissions.
Yes, definitely, because you want a deeper and a faster molecular response. Imagine if you know that you have a molecular response, but you do not have a deeper and a major faster. So with the second line TKI, because you are more potent, you are going to get a more faster and a deeper molecular response.
And like, what is the most common prognostic tool which you use in your clinical practice, like UTOS or the Hasford score or the
We use the
SOCAL?
UTOS score or the so-called score. The problem with so-called score is earlier we were using it depending on the guide this thing, but as the guidelines say, the UTOS score is the best score.
Okay, ma'am. And is there any change in the treatment recommendation now during this COVID era for a newly diagnosed CML patient, or you follow the same protocol?
See, for the newly diagnosed CML-CP, we still follow the same protocol. So wherever the patient, it's it's a after all oral drug. All your tyrosine kinase inhibitors are oral. So you will go with the either of the tyrosine kinase inhibitor, the first generation or the second generation, depending on the class of patients you're seeing, the age of the patient. If they are young patients, well educated, compliant, then you are willing to take second line TKI, we will start second line TKI. If they're not affordable and they're not able to take second line TKI, then obviously we'll still continue with the first line TKI itself. So if you ask me at this point, I will still consider first line TKI in most of the patients. Only a class of patients who are looking for treatment-free interval or looking for something where they want a deeper and a faster response, we will try the second line TKI. If a patient is not tolerating the first line TKI imatinib, then obviously we go to second line TKI. And now with your so many generic versions of dasatinib, yeah, we have multiple options. We can consider using dasatinib, and with the patients also, we can counsel them to start the second line TKI easily.
And even if a patient is diagnosed with, like, if the person is COVID positive and he's already a CML patient, so the medicine will continue as usual.
Yeah, you have to be careful. The patient will have more of neutropenia, immunosuppression, myelosuppression will be there, but we will continue the dose, oral dose, probably at a lower dose. And there, I think probably second line TKIs are better over imatinib in a COVID patient.
And if because it's a lung infection, so they are more prone for, like, if there's a pleural effusion also along with that, so in that case dasatinib should be avoided in such cases. And
If that's what, if a patient has a pre-existing lung problem, then you definitely avoid dasatinib. So you will probably go with the imatinib, nilotinib thing, but otherwise you can go with the second generation TKIs.
thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.